Hello, and welcome to episode 25 of the Elevate Your Running podcast. My name is Sarah Manderscheid, and I am here with my co host, Austin Myers. Austin, hello. Happy Tuesday. How are you?
I'm doing great. We just had an awesome holiday weekend celebrating the 4th of July. And today we've got a great conversation on tap. So I'm really looking forward to it, Sarah.
Absolutely. Yes, we do. If you have watched our stories over the last 24 hours, you know what we are talking about today. Before we dive into the topic for today's episode, I want to share our elevated moments. And my elevated moment of the last week is probably and most definitely the chance and opportunity to slow down over the last 3-4 days. With the long holiday weekend, it felt like everything just kind of slowed down starting on Friday, and that just felt really, really good. I had a chance to sit outside on my patio and slow down and read a book and take time to do things that have been on my list to do, or things that I've wanted to do over the last several months. So that felt really good. And I got a jump start to work yesterday for this week. It's a very, very, very busy week. So many exciting new opportunities and partnerships with Elevate Your Running. So it's exciting to see that. So a lot of great things coming up this week. So very, very excited, and for the chance to kind of slow my roll a little bit. So Austin, what is your elevated moment?
Yeah, my elevated moment is getting back in the pool and swimming over the past week. I've posted about it on social media and the benefits that I personally believe are there for runners and any endurance athletes in getting in the pool and in swimming laps. Before I actually got into, run specific training and building up for marathons and things like I'm doing now, I was actually primarily a swimmer. I was swimming for the local masters team for the year that preceded training for my first marathon. So it feels really good to be back in the pool. It certainly is helping with my recovery from the recent ultra marathon. So that is my elevated moment, because I do find a lot of joy in training, and different types of training fall into that for me. So, in that same breath, I do want to announce, on part of Elevate Your Running and Sarah and I and the podcast, that we have a new partnership that we're really excited about. We are partnered with Inside Tracker. Whether you run, ride, hike, or swim, you understand what it means to push harder, reach farther, and go the extra mile. This relentless drive runs in your blood. That's why Inside Tracker provides you with a personalized plan to build endurance, boost energy, and optimize your health for the long haul. Created by leading scientists in aging, genetics, and biometrics, Inside Tracker analyzes your blood, DNA, and fitness tracking data to identify where you are optimized and where you are not. You'll get a daily action plan with personalized guidance on the right exercise, nutrition, and supplementation for your body. And when you connect with Inside Tracker with your Fitbit or Garmin, you'll also unlock real-time recovery pro tips after you complete your workout. It's like having your own personal trainer and nutritionist in your pocket. For a limited time, you can get 20% off the entire Inside Tracker store. Just go to insidetracker.com/elevate your running. That's insidetracker.com/elevate your running. I know that we are really excited about this partnership with Inside Tracker. Sarah, it is a company that we believe in. It supports the things that we discuss on this podcast. And it's just something that we feel like has been a long time coming.
Yeah, it's a really exciting opportunity. Thank you, Inside Tracker, for believing in us and believing in the podcast. And I've used it a few times in different parts of a marathon training buildup. And I really, really loved it. I did it last summer leading into Boston. I want to say it was probably about a year ago now. So I would have been maybe a month or so into training. And it really gave me some really great data to look at to see, okay, what do I need to shift and pivot into so I get the most out of my next 3 months of training? And also, what am I doing really well? And is my body already really, really stressed? Hopefully it's not, right? It's only a month into training. And then I took a second test right after the Mesa Marathon, and that's probably a story for another day. I know Austin knows all about it. And let's just say when you take a test like that 24 hours after running a war marathon, nothing's really going to look good. So, including the blood coming out of my arms. So, anyways, we're going to jump into the topic for today. We are talking about all things easy running, which is maybe one of everyone's favorite topics to talk about, right? Cue the laughter. So I know a lot of people say easy running. Like, why would you run easy or why would you run slow if you're trying to race fast? And we're going to dive into that today. We're going to talk all about what it is, why we need to do it, and then answer some questions that our awesome Instagram and Facebook audience sent us over in the last 24 hours. So thank you to everyone who contributed to that question or to that story and asked some really great questions. So we're going to jump right in. What
Yeah.
is easy running?
Yeah, for sure. So, we've talked about on this podcast, Sarah, that hard is relative. And if hard is relative, then so too is easy. So I think it's important that before we get into the questions that we received from our listeners, just to define specifically, from the run coach's perspective and also from the athlete's perspective, what is easy running? So Sarah, I'll kind of let you run with that topic to get us started here.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of different ways that you can look at easy running, which is a really cool part of easy running. And I don't want easy running either to mimic or think slow, because I think slow can have a negative sort of feeling that athletes don't want to associate with. So we're going to be referencing it as just easy conversational paced running. So that's exactly what it is. It's conversational pace. So if you're running alone, you should be able to talk to yourself in a way where you're not gasping for air. You should be able to complete full sentences while talking, or as I like to do, singing to my music. A lot of, I host a lot of community group runs. There's a lot of running with other people that go on in my life, and I know with a lot of athletes who listen to this podcast as well. So, invitation to you is when you are talking with the other runners at the running group where you're meeting up for a morning running session, if you are breathing hard or even struggling to complete a full sentence, you're running too fast, which means you get to slow down. And, I talk all about you get to train slow to race fast, and we're going to get more into that later. So you want to think conversational pace. You want to think singing or talking to a friend or to yourself without gasping or breathing heavy for air. You can look at your heart rate. Now, if you have a Garmin or a Coros watch, the technology on the watch isn't going to be 100% accurate. So if you have a chest strap, that is going to be by far the best way to figure out, your zone 2 heart rate. So essentially you want to stay in zone 1, zone 2 for your heart rate when you are running easy. And now that's usually under 145 beats per minute. But there are exceptions to that rule. So we'll talk more about that later too. You can also look at it as 75% of your max heart rate. You can look at it as 2 to 3 minutes slower than your 5K pace relative to effort, right? It could be 2.5 minutes slower than half marathon pace. If we are talking 5K, 10K pace, probably closer to that 3 minutes. So let's say, for example, you run a 6:20 pace average for a 5K, then you're looking at, potentially your easy run to fall between 8:50 and 9:20 minutes per mile for your pace on your easy day. So that's a really easy and effective way to kind of gauge what's going to work for you. Easy days definitely get to be easier too when the training starts to intensify. Our bodies need it, our minds need it. It's definitely something everyone's heard me talk about this before. We keep our easy days easy and our hard days hard. What does that mean? We get to run really, really easy on the days that we're not working out, and the days that we are doing a track or tempo or goal pace work, we are doing that workout effectively, efficiently. We are hitting our paces, and we're adding in maybe strength training, some core work, some lower leg stability, something else to kind of stimulate the body, to really make it a hard day, all within reason too, because at the end of the day, we all want to stay happy and healthy. And that's first and foremost. So easy running will also create a healthy and happy runner, right? How many times have you been out there running? And I fell into this when I got started with running 16 years ago, running fast all the time. Even 5 years ago, when I was doing Orange Theory and I was doing high intensity interval work on a treadmill 2, 3, 4 times a week, I was always working through a niggle, if not injured, always, because my body was constantly stressed. And that's a really tough place to be in, because when you're constantly stressed in training and you have all these other stressors going on in life, which could be work, family, relationships, finances, mental health, whatever that is, could be a lot of those things too, right? It doesn't have to be just one. It could be all 4 or 5 of those things that I mentioned. That's also stress. And if you have too much stress going on in your body, you will eventually get injured, or you will just burn out, which isn't fun either. So running 80% is kind of the general rule. 80% of your training gets to be in this easy zone running of feeling really good, feeling light, feeling like you could run this pace forever, or for a series of the morning. I've had runs like that, right? You come back and you're like, I could have done that all morning. That's the feeling you want to channel.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you hit the nail on the head a few times there in discussing how life stress is a really big factor that we have to take into consideration as athletes. And I think we fail to do so quite often. We feel like, we should be able to perform at our highest level to our fullest potential more often than not. And the reality is that sometimes life will not allow that to happen. So how do we balance that? We balance and we work in easy running. It's critical. It's balancing cortisol, that stress hormone that's being released. And something that I've noticed from the athlete's perspective is, if I'm in a heightened state of stress from outside stressors in my life, or if I got a poor night's sleep the night before, or like you were mentioning, when you're deep into a training block, or, in my situation, training for a marathon, the day after a really hard tempo, speed, track workout, whatever it may be, those are the days where easy running is hardest. And what I mean by that is, you're trying to make sure that your heart rate is low. Your heart rate's going to try to trend up and up and up a little bit quicker on the days where you are living in a heightened state of stress. So it's important to understand that and not look too deeply into the pace that you see ticking by mile, because if you have to run a certain pace and it's 2 to 3 minutes slower than you were running your speed workout yesterday, that's what you need on that day for your body to not only recover, but also to continue to receive fitness gains that we'll probably get into as we progress through this episode, because there's so much value for us as endurance athletes to train that low aerobic, that zone 2 that you're talking about. There's 5 heart rate zones, and we're talking about training zone 2 out of 5. So we're pretty low on the spectrum, because there are immense gains to receive from the athlete's perspective in training in that zone 2 area.
Absolutely. And the more you run, the more you train, the more that you're in tune with what's going on in your body each day, the easier it is to find your easy pace and just fall into it. And your easy pace too gets to fluctuate every single day, right? It doesn't mean that if I ran a 6:20 average 5K that I can't run faster than 8:50 pace on my easy days. Some days 8:40 or 8:30 feels really easy and really good. And there are a lot of days where it just doesn't. And it's knowing your body and knowing what each day is going to bring. And that's a huge, huge, huge piece and component to easy running. As with everything with training, one of my favorite answers to every question that an athlete asks me is, it depends. Everyone is so different that Austin, what I coached you on for Buffalo Marathon is very, very different from what I coach other athletes on, because it's all based on who that person is as a human and as an athlete, and knowing what's going on in their everyday life too. I don't necessarily love to take that all into consideration because I feel like everyone handles stress differently. But I think it's also very important to know what's going on. And as a coach, to have that in the back of my mind, and as athletes, to have that in the back of your mind as well. Something that happened last week to me was that I had to have a very small medical procedure done maybe about 5 days ago. And the whole time leading up to it, I was like, I'm fine. Everything's fine. I'm not stressed about this. Well, once it was over, I felt so much lighter, and it actually was causing stress. And I was telling myself that, trying to talk to myself that it was fine, everything's fine. But it was adding this element of stress that I wasn't totally aware of. So that's just a food for thought. Like, if there are certain things going on in your life that you're like, well, this isn't ideal, but it's fine, it could actually be causing stress. And sometimes leaning into that and doing what you need to do to correct it or to fix it or to honor it, right? And just say, this is where I am in life right now. This is the season that I'm in. This stressor isn't going away, is also fine too.
Yeah, I mean, this is where, we as athletes have autonomy, and we have the ability to advocate for ourselves and understand what we need. And I really believe in understanding the purpose of a training session on any given day. So, if you're working with a coach and you're receiving programming, maybe you're building up to a race and you hope to run a PR, your ability to run that PR in 4 months is probably going to largely depend on your ability to meet the specific guidelines of each individual workout in the months that precede that race. So consider this: you have 3 or 4 easy runs per week, you have a workout, and you have a long run. Maybe that long run has paces within it, or maybe it's an easy long run. Your ability to make sure that you are checking that box of, yes, I ran this run easy. I was in a zone 2 low aerobic heart rate area, and I was able to talk. I was able to allow my body to receive those fitness gains that we get from easy running. And that is not only going to help to build fitness over the course of months, but it's going to allow you to then perform even better on your workout days, the days where you have speed in your run. And you want to make sure that you're hitting the specific paces that maybe you hope to hit when it comes race day. It's critical for us to understand the purpose of the workout, because the expected outcome of every single training session is not the same. But we, as the athlete or the coach, have to be able to provide that and to be able to understand it, so that we understand going into the run what we are supposed to do beyond simply putting one foot in front of the other.
Right, right. My job as a coach is to definitely educate athletes on why we do easy running. Sometimes I even add, this is your easy pace. Let's really target this pace, because, easy can be very subjective, right? What people may think, or what athletes might think might be easy, actually isn't, because they just don't know, right? We don't know what we don't know. So I want you to think of it as, easy running as the aerobic zone that Austin mentioned, but also it's like the engine in your body, right? So we want to have the strongest engine possible. So could we say maybe it's like a Ferrari or a Porsche engine, something that's strong and powerful and fast? That is what we're building up to. And every single time you go out there and get, a 30, 45, 60-minute easy run in, you are building that engine slowly. And my, goal as a coach and as an athlete myself is, by the end of a training cycle, to have that engine built as strong as possible, so you are able to go into the race feeling really good, as well as, having some support around workouts and all the other things that go into racing. But that is the best way, and the best kind of analogy that I can describe it as, is we get to build this engine, be strong, be powerful, be fast. And who doesn't want that. Maybe some
Yeah.
people don't, but it feels good. Austin, you're nodding.
If you are listening to this podcast, that's exactly what you want. And that's exactly what we're here to help you do. And I think that it's important, as we become more experienced as runners and as athletes, to begin to, get gratification and feel good about the fact that you ran your easy run easy. That is something that has been an area of development for me as a runner. Is, yeah, the pace is going to look different on those easy runs. It's not going to be as fast. But if we can drop the ego and not worry so much about the pace, and maybe if we are using average heart rate or heart rate per mile as a metric that we're looking at for easy running, like, let's begin to feel good about that. When we get done with our run and the goal was to run easy in a zone 2 low aerobic heart rate, did you do it? And if you did, feel great about it and know that you just deposited some pennies into the fitness bank and you're going to be stronger for it down the road.
Yeah, let's say dollars, because that feels stronger.
Yeah.
We just deposited some dollars into the bank. And, last week we talked about the paperclip idea, right, for mental strength. And you could definitely do that with easy runs too, if this is an area that you struggle with. Like for each easy run, you get to clip a paperclip together. And by the end of a training cycle, you get to see how strong your engine is inside your body to be able to produce the results that you're looking for on race day or at the end of a training cycle, or just being fit for life, right? Like being able to show up and do whatever you want to do at a moment's notice. So that's really exciting and a fun way to kind of position it. But I think we've all been there, right? Like easy pace is not sexy, right? We can all, I think, agree on that. And it's definitely more welcomed in my training after a hard workout or a hard block. I definitely need it and want it more. But when you're on Strava and you're looking at people running and you're seeing these really fast paces all the time, like, one, try not to compare yourself to others. I know that's really, really, really hard to do, but at the end of the day, like, that's not going to make you or the other person any better. Like, we are all our own person. The only person that you get to compete with is yourself, and using that for fuel. So if you are on Strava and you're looking at, everyone running faster or longer or running more elevation gain, like, know that that's just a very small snapshot into their window of training. And you don't really know what's going on. You don't know how they're feeling. You don't know how they're showing up. Oftentimes I see people running and I do check out their heart rate and I'm like, yikes, like 170, that's a really high heart rate for what would be, a Monday morning run or whatever. So know that everyone is just doing the best that they can do. And if Strava is causing maybe anxiety, or you feel like there's comparison going on there, or you're not feeling good because other people are running fast or whatever, like, invitation to get off of Strava, and that's okay too. Or like I was talking to Austin, like, we can also train really slow and easy, right? We get to train really easy, and the easy paces are on Strava, and then you can blow people away with the pendulum swing of paces, which I like to call the pendulum pace of running easy. Let's say it's 9 minutes per mile, and you get to race at 6:15 or 6 minutes a mile, or whatever that looks like for you. Maybe it's 11 minutes a mile and you're going to race at 8 minutes a mile, like a really large pendulum swing, and just blow those people away.
Yeah, for sure. And I think this is a really good jumping off point into some of the questions that we received from our listeners through Instagram. So let's go ahead and get started with the first one. And Sarah, I'd be interested to hear your take on this question specifically. The question is, how long until you see benefits from aerobic easy training like we've been discussing?
Right. This is a really great question, and it came from an athlete who I just adore. So thank you for sending this in. So you're going to love this answer. It depends. But it really does. So on paper, it can take anywhere from 2 to 12 weeks. I think sometimes it's more mental, right? Like, once we know that we should be doing it, within 2 weeks, we're like, oh my gosh, this feels a lot easier. I feel like I can do this. I would say it probably takes closer to 3 months just to get your body used to it, especially if you've been running fast and hard and in that gray zone for a long time. It's not gonna happen overnight, so that's something to remember. But general guidelines are 2 to 12 weeks. The other really cool piece to it is that with every easy run that you're putting the dollars deposits into the training bank, it is working. You might not feel it right away, right? It's kind of like, when our hair grows or something, like when our hair is growing, we may not see it every single day. But if we take a picture between now and 3 months from now, especially, for any of us who don't get a haircut in 3 months, like we can see that our hair has grown. So in that time, like you might not feel it working, but it is definitely working. So that's kind of cool too. So every time you run, nice check mark. Um,
Yeah, yeah, and I love metaphors to explain this
yeah.
concept of easy running. So I'm going to throw two at you right now. The first one I'm
Cool.
sure people have heard before, and if they haven't, you can credit it to me. But the metaphor is that, we are building a foundation. We're essentially building a base is the term
Yeah.
that is used in this running space. You are base building when you are running these easy miles. And consider if you were to build a house or build a mansion, we would make sure that the foundation that we set for that house or for that mansion was as established as it could be before we began to build the house, before we
Mhm.
began to focus on the more material aspects of the place that we were going to be living. It's the same thing that we're doing when we're building a base of fitness, and we're doing that through these easy miles. We are building the foundation. And if we try to jump ahead in that process, and if we try to outrun our current fitness levels, which is something that I've talked about previously in the podcast, is something we all need to be aware of. Like, let's not
Mhm.
outrun where we're currently at, because we have to meet ourselves where we're at if we're going to make progress over time. So that is, the main thing that I want people to take away for why are we doing this? We're building a foundation. And because that foundation is built, you are really going to be able to put amazing things out there, both in your race results, your workout paces. All of those things are going to be a byproduct of your ability to run easy miles easy. And I think it is important to see this as an investment. Like, this is an
Mhm.
investment that is going to provide both immediate benefits and compounding benefits over time. So what is the immediate benefit? The immediate benefit is that we are not overstressing our body at this current place of training. We're allowing ourselves to get the work in, but also be prepared for future workouts. We're allowing our body to balance the training stress with the life stress, with the work stress. And then moving through time, what are the benefits that we're receiving? What are the benefits that are compounding? We're building that base. We're beginning to see that the easy miles are coming easier to us. Our speed, fast, race pace miles are getting even faster. Like, these things are both immediate and they are in the distant future. And this investment, if you make it properly, is just going to compound over time throughout your running career.
Absolutely. Those are all great points, Austin. And like we get to show up happy and healthy. And that's what easy running gives us, right? It allows us to run more often while staying healthy. How many times have you been running in that gray zone and you have niggles or something's off or you're completely out with an injury? We've all been there. It does create more efficiency around fat burning or burning fat for fuel too, which is really great. It improves our fatigue resistance, which is what, as endurance athletes, we all want. The higher our fatigue resistance or the better our fatigue resistance, it's like the bread and butter of our training. And that is a huge, huge reason to be able to do it. It just makes you a stronger runner overall, which is a really cool thing, too. I know it doesn't feel like that always in the moment either.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it certainly doesn't. Especially on those days where the slower, easier miles are feeling harder than your workouts, which is certainly something that we'll touch on a little bit later. And it can be a reality for a lot of people. But it's important to
Mhm.
understand that if you are if you are meeting the standard by whatever metric that you decide to use to ensure that you're running your easy miles easy, there is benefit there. You're just not always going to see it. But transitioning into our next question, and I really like this question, what is the golden heart rate zone and time? Basically, what zone or what numbers are we looking at as far as where our heart rate should be for an easy run? And then what percentage of our training is within that zone?
It depends. No, just kidding. Actually, it does kind of depend.
It does depend, yes.
It does. I love this question too. I mean, generally speaking, zone 1, zone 2, under 145 beats per minute is kind of the guidelines with heart rates. However, there are people who have extremely high resting heart rates and have very high heart rates when they're running. So this doesn't really apply to them. So what we get to do is kind of shift back into like the pace guidelines that we were talking about earlier, where if you do have a really high heart rate or a higher heart rate, where I've seen athletes like they might start out at like 138 after the first mile, and then they jump right into 160 and they're holding, if not growing a little bit higher with each mile. So what you can do is consider the pace guidelines. So marathon, half marathon, 2.5 to 2.5 minutes slower for easy running, 5K, 10K, 2.5 to 3 minutes slower for your easy running, and kind of go on that. That is a really great way and tool to be able to find what's going to work best for you. There's also another way. I've done this with some of my athletes where I have them go into a 30-minute tempo run, and a tempo run is going to be an effort that you can hold. It's a comfortably hard effort. It's a little bit slower than 5K pace, but you can hold for an hour. And what I do is I take the last 20 minutes of their heart rate and use a calculation to predict what their quote unquote zone 2 is. And that's a fancier way to do it. But in terms of needing immediate results, we're all like in this world of wanting immediate results, right? Using the pace guidelines is a really, really great way to be able to figure out where you fall in that category. Now, with heart rate training, there's so many different things to think about too, right? How stressed we are, how many hours of sleep we got the night before, our hydration or dehydration levels, how much caffeine we've had that morning or night. I know when I run at night, let's say Sloan's Lake, on Monday nights, I would see this almost every single Monday night. I would sit in traffic, I'd get to group running at night, newsflash, isn't exactly my favorite time to run either. And my heart rate would usually be higher than like on a morning run for sure. And that's okay. It's kind of looking at all the different factors that kind of go into how you showed up for that run. And also know that like training isn't linear, right? Our heart rate isn't going to be linear. If you have one quote unquote bad run where let's say your heart rate's just high, that's okay. It's not going to be the end of the world for your training. You're still going to be able, you still made a deposit that day. You still got out the door. You're still being consistent. And there's some really great wins to focus on that side of things too.
Yeah, and there's so many metrics that you just pointed out, and all of them aren't even numbers based. Like a lot of them can simply be like, how are you feeling on that day to judge what an easy pace is for you. One that I've personally used in the past, in the times, before I've been coached, or maybe I was just following a very like bare bones outline of a training plan. One thing that I kind of lean back on is what's called the MAF 180 method. It's basically the Maffetone, that's with an F, 180 method. And it's just a simple calculation that gives you a general idea of where your heart rate should be. And it basically takes the number 180 minus your age and the number that you get from that. So for example, if you're 30 years old, you subtract 180 or 30 from 180, you get 150. Now, what that number represents is your maximum aerobic heart rate. I think we hear a lot about max heart rate. So basically like, how high can I get my heart rate at an all out effort? That's certainly not what we're looking at here. we're looking at max aerobic heart rate. So, what is the upper end of where my heart rate would be when I'm still in an aerobic state? Now, is our goal to sit right at, for this 30-year-old athlete, to sit right at 150? Certainly not. What we can actually do is we can subtract maybe another 15 from that number that you get. So the number's 150. Let's subtract another 15 for this 30-year-old athlete. And now we've got a range. We've got a range of 135 beats per minute. And then that higher end is 150. So if you see your heart rate at 150, 151 or higher, you are not running in an aerobic state. I find that as just useful in understanding like what these zones can look like, and knowing when maybe if you're leaning on heart rate, which is something that I do from time to time with the help of a heart rate strap that I got from Garmin, just understanding like, okay, I'm at that higher end. It's time to cut back the pace and make sure that I'm running in this aerobic state.
Yeah, that's a great point, Austin. Like we get to look at that data on our watch if we want to do that on a run. It's a really easy way. You can look at pace, you can look at laps, you can look at your heart rate when you're running. And if that's important to you and you don't have a good sense of how your body feels when you're in zone 3 or zone 4, like that's a really great way to lean into. Maybe, not all metrics matter, but like we're not, the Garmin doesn't always show us the right results, right? But it can be close enough. So looking at that, and then if you need to slow down, maybe you need to do run walking too. Like when athletes first start getting into running and their heart rates are really high, it's like we get to run walk for a little bit. We get to build some really good base miles, the foundation of the house, the mansion that we're trying to build, and go from there. And I think that's really important. And it can be a really good tool. But if you also know that if you're looking at your heart rate while you're running and it's making your heart rate go higher, to stop looking at your heart rate altogether. And I've had athletes turn that feature totally off because this particular athlete has a very high heart rate in general at all times. And it was just not serving her in any sort of way. So we turned it off. And I've put on the sensors before for myself to tell me when I'm going over my zone 2. And that doesn't really work either, because in my experiences, I was getting more agitated or my heart rate was getting higher every time my Garmin buzzed because my heart rate was high. So it didn't really work for that either. So leaning into your body is one of the best ways, in my opinion, to figure out where you need to be. But that takes time.
Yeah. And it's a critical understanding that you just mentioned, Sarah, that it's okay if you have to walk for a minute. Like I did that plenty of times in recent marathon builds. And, basically there's trends that I notice as an athlete, right? So and this is a trend for all athletes. If you have a big hill in front of you and you're running up that hill, even if you don't increase the pace, you maintain the same pace, your heart rate is going to go up because you're exerting yourself to a higher level. So plenty of times in my most recent marathon build, my first marathon build, I would finish that hill out and then completely walk until my heart rate got back into my aerobic zone. And then I would resume running. That's just a strategy that I personally infused into my training because I felt I want to run the hill and I want to make sure that, I'm allowing my body to feel these hills. But at the same time, if I continue to run off of that hill, my heart rate is going to stay elevated and it's not going to go down. And because of that, I'm not going to get the benefits of this run. So it's important to understand these trends as an athlete and to make these decisions. They're the hard decisions sometimes. It's the hard decision to slow down. But if you do it, it's a worthy investment to make in both your fitness and your ability to set PRs in the future.
You crushed it. I mean, we have to make hard decisions in life and in running, and no one wants to make them. And sometimes it's the best thing for us later down the road for sure. And we've talked about this. I know my athletes are probably asking this question now, and wondering, I've been a big believer, and I talk about this with everyone about like not walking during training, right? Continuing to push through or flow through your training. But I think that, or I know that comes from, don't decide to walk because it's hard, right? Versus I just ran up a really big hill. This is supposed to be a recovery run because I did a workout yesterday. So I'm going to stand at the top of this hill, wait for my heart rate to come down, and then slowly get back into running and finish this run with the intent of an actual recovery run. So it's two very different things. Every run has a very different strategy and a different approach. And it's also pivoting and shifting when you're out there on your run to figure out what's going to serve you and serve you best for that run. Now, I have, from where I live in Boulder, a 3 mile uphill run to Wonderland Lake. And it's just shy of 3 miles, and it's about 300 feet of gain. And you better believe that if I've had a tough week or I had a workout the day before, that I'm stopping at the entry point to that lake and I'm waiting for my heart rate to come down because it's 3 miles, close to 3 miles, it's like 2.8, 300 feet of gain. It's a lot. And I'm usually running 9:30 pace up that. Feels like a slog, like running up the hill. And that's okay. Know that we all do it. And when I have goal pace work in a long run, I'm not stopping, right? That's the difference. That is a workout. I need to be intentional with that. The point is to string miles and miles together at goal pace to be able to flow through it and show up strong at the end of that race. So I'm not stopping. So it's very different for different reasons.
Yeah. And one thing you'll learn as a runner is that the most beautiful views are always at the top of a hill. So if you're running your easy miles and you're running up a hill, embrace the fact that when you get to the top of that hill, you get to let your heart rate come down as you embrace those beautiful views, especially in Colorado. So, yeah, I really love that point. Just understanding, the differentiation of, what's my purpose today and how can I achieve that purpose? So the next question that we have is it beneficial for everyone to do this training or these runs by heart rate specifically? And this athlete states that their heart rate is naturally on the higher side. So Sarah, I'd be interested to hear your take on this, and then I can kind of provide my own opinion on this idea.
I mean, if your heart rate's tending to be higher, I think it's pretty tough to be able to gauge your pace or your easy running off of zone 2, right? I think everyone's going to fall into a different area. So if you fall into a higher heart rate zone, relying back on pace recommendations, right? Or pace guidelines, I think that's a really big thing. If you're trending to be more on like quote unquote like average side and the heart rate's working for you, lean into that. But if you are going to go the heart rate route, get a strap for sure, because the watch is not going to be accurate. And will it be close? Probably, but we don't know when and where. And I've had amazing runs where I feel incredible and I know my body. 16 years of running, I know what feels good and what doesn't feel good. And I've had runs where I felt incredible and my average heart rate was like 155, way higher. That's like threshold zone. And I thought that's so wrong because I felt so good and I was able to sing and do all the things. Austin, what's your take on that question?
Yeah, I mean, I can take it back to a moment in time in training for this last marathon. It was an easy run day. I have my heart rate strap that I always wear for easy runs, or at least wear 75% of the time for my easy runs. And this is a Bluetooth connection. So if you get a heart rate strap, it's connecting via Bluetooth to your watch, and it's basically giving you real-time data. All of that to say that my heart rate strap did not connect that day. Okay. So I'm running and it's like a slight downhill that I'm running. I'm still keeping a pretty conservative pace. I feel great. It's just one of those days where it's like everything's clicking. Like you said, Sarah, your body after years of doing this, and you just understand that yes, this is an easy pace. And it was that type of day. But because I had my heart rate strap on, I continued to just kind of take a peek at what that number was giving me. And it was exponentially higher than I felt like it was.
I remember
So
this run.
yeah, I remember telling you about it. And, I was like, I was going to be a rebel that day. And I'm like, you know what? This is not right. I don't know why it's incorrect, but it's just not right. So I get done with the run and I'm about to save the workout on my Garmin, and it says external heart rate connected. Basically, it says that before every single run, typically when the heart rate monitor connects, because it's basically saying, okay, the Bluetooth is connected. You're going to get real-time data. It connected at the end of the run. So I was running based off of that wrist-based heart rate, which we've kind of talked about being slightly inaccurate at times, and it can certainly be wildly inaccurate at times, depending on how that sensor is connected to your wrist or whatever data it's pulling. But I just found that really interesting, and that was a moment that I'll always remember, because it's a testament to running based off of feel and understanding that you don't have to be so attached to the numbers. Like, let's really tap into how we feel, because that is going to be another strength. If we can tap into how we feel, that's going to be a strength that we're then going to use in big workouts leading into race day, on race day. Understanding our reaction in these situations, what's easy and what is pushing it, is really crucial for us to understand and can be learned through experience.
Yeah, it's one of the most beautiful gifts of training and racing, and working with a coach or working with someone who can help you kind of find that feeling. And, a lot of my athletes talk about heart rates with me, and it is something that we get to focus in on. And once I have worked with them for a while and they understand the feeling, we have a much different conversation, because it's not just always about heart rate, it is about how they feel. Especially if I've run with them in person, I can tell very, very quickly who is running easy at whatever heart rate and who is running probably a little bit faster. So I've had it on both sides, both ends of the spectrum, where I've ran with athletes who have very low heart rates, like in the 130s when they're running. And when I run with them in person, they're gasping for air at every 5 seconds. They're running way too fast. So just because the heart rate shows that they're running in like the 130, like 136, 138, doesn't support the fact that they need to slow down. And it's because of the wrist, right? The wrist heart rate gauge. And same can be true too, where I see other runners maybe running, really nice, easy jogging pace. They could probably, afford to get a little bit faster, but there really isn't any detriment to running a little bit slower or easier if that's what you want to do, especially if the cadence is there and it feels good for you and you're not alternating like your running form.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's important to understand that, if your purpose for that day is an easy run, let's err on the side of easier as opposed to harder. I think a trap that a
Yeah.
lot of athletes fall into, myself included, especially in the past, is that we want to push ourselves to see how fast we can run while still being within our easy running constraints. So
Yeah.
maybe you're like, all right, my max aerobic heart rate is 150. I'm going to ride that 150 this entire run, and we're going to see how fast we can do this. And I think that there's an additional testament to be made to potentially the importance of running your easy runs on a time scale as opposed
Yeah.
to like a mileage scale. And what I mean by that is, you're going to go out for, and this is prescribed by either your training program or your coach, you're going to go out on a 60-minute easy run as opposed to a 7-mile easy run. And I think it's important to potentially approach our training, especially on easy days, through that lens, because when we do that, we're not trying to see how fast we can run these 7 miles because we have a really busy day. Instead, we're out there. We understand that we're going to give 1 hour out of our 24-hour day to this run. And it doesn't really matter how fast I run, because no matter what, I'm out there and committed for 60 minutes.
Absolutely. It's one of one of the biggest reasons why I prescribe time on feet during the week and then usually distance on the weekend, because I feel like with marathon training specifically, no one wants to see 2.5 or a 3 hour run on their schedule. Let's see a 16, 18, 20 miler instead. Um, but when you have the 60 minutes, I think too, it gives maybe a sense of peace knowing you're committed to 60 minutes. Like if I were to say 5, 6, 7 miles in that 60 minutes, I've been there myself. It's this race against the clock to get it done. And I also agree with you on kind of the pacing and making sure you're not bumping up on like the fastest pace or the fastest. You can get right at your, max aerobic zone every single run. What I love is being able to see like different paces, right, throughout the week. So maybe one day you're feeling really, really good. So you're going to go on the extreme and bump right up against it. And then other days you're going to feel a little bit different. So maybe you might be, falling 5, 6, 7 beats under, or maybe a little bit over, whatever that looks like. But what's really, really cool in the fall, this is my favorite, is after the summer training, we're all training in the heat, humidity, elevation, and fall weather comes, the first cool run. I can't wait for everyone to look at their heart rate and or see a different pace on their watch, because it's going to feel a lot easier. You're going to see a much lower heart rate. I remember last fall going out for my Wash Park group run, which was on Wednesday mornings. I was probably averaging like 140, 142 on those runs, maybe a little bit higher because Tuesdays were always a double. I had a workout and another run later in the day. And the first cool morning we had in September, I remember seeing 132 on the heart rate. And I'm like, yes, this is what it's all about. So we're, 1 week into July, a few days into July, I guess. So we have a few more months to get into that cooler weather, but it's something to strive for and know that this season of summer too is a little bit of an outlier. It is going to be training us to be running stronger this fall too.
Yeah, we reap what we sow, especially in those summer miles.
Yeah.
I've been thinking a lot about the heat as we've had this conversation, because heat and humidity, and Sarah, for you in Colorado, altitude, all of those things are going to be factors that can also play into those easy metrics that we're looking at. We have 2 questions left. The last one's going to kind of be a fun one for us to share. But this question is, why do easy miles feel harder than workouts or faster paces?
That's a really great question. And my answer is it depends, right? Like, I feel like, what is the definition of easy and what is the definition of hard for this athlete, right? What is feeling hard about an easy run? Because it shouldn't feel hard. It should feel like, does it feel hard to run a slower pace? Does your body feel fatigued? Are your legs really heavy? Are you finding it hard to breathe? Like, let's dive into this question a little bit more. So I'd love to kind of know more about why this particular athlete is asking this question. But it shouldn't feel harder. It might feel foreign to you as an athlete if you're not used to running at a slower pace than maybe you were, a few months ago or last year. If you were running all of your running at this like gray zone, super high, maybe threshold zone 3 all the time, right? If you're feeling stressed in life outside of running, easy running might feel harder, but it shouldn't actually feel harder than workouts. But workouts to me feel harder in a different way than easy running does anyways, right? The flow should be there in a hard workout, right? Your flow, your cadence, your pace, you should feel pretty smooth on workouts. Easy running might not necessarily feel smooth because you have to slow your pace down, but your cadence should still be there as well. So it's diving into it very specifically for each person would be my answer to that. So not a great, I don't know. Not a
No,
great
no,
answer from.
it's important to understand what challenges we're being faced with.
Yeah.
I can speak from some of the days that I felt like my easy run for that week was potentially the hardest run of the week. Now, what do I mean by hard? It was a mentally hard run. I had to push through maybe the mindset that said, I don't want to go out and run today. Or I
Yeah.
felt the fatigue of my body. A lot of times I would have a workout and then I would have an easy run the next morning. And that easy run after a workout can be extremely hard, especially, and this is where it
Yeah.
gets tricky. If you have an amazing workout or you have a really good run the day before, guess what? Like there's ebbs and flows of life. There's a really good chance
Yeah.
that here in the next day or two, you're going to feel a little bit run down because you taxed your body, you pushed yourself hard. If you have a big long run on a Saturday, even if you have a complete off day on a Sunday, that Monday morning run may still feel really hard because your body's still recovering. And we haven't even, in this equation, we have not even thrown in the factor of life stress. So it's just
Yeah.
about understanding like what challenges am I facing today and why is it making this run a little bit harder than maybe previous days worth of running. Um, Now, absolutely. Like, should it be the same type of hard as a workout? No, because running at faster paces provides its own unique set of difficulties. But running is still running and it's not an easy thing to do. So if you're
Yeah.
struggling on your easy days, it's okay. Just really stick to the things that you can use to judge as a success for that specific training session.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And give yourself grace around it too. Like every day isn't going to be perfect. Some days, some weeks, some months are going to feel harder than others. And that's okay too, because that's life and that's training.
Yeah. So the final question is a fun one. What are our favorite things to do to keep the easy miles easy? And I can almost certainly guarantee that, Sarah, our answers will differ a bit here.
I think everyone knows my answer, right? I love to sing. I love to sing while I'm running. And sometimes upper body dance moves, which is interesting because I'm not necessarily doing the arm swing, right? But if I can get into an easy run flow, I am 100% singing probably to Taylor Swift. And sorry for anyone who has to hear that on the Boulder Bike Path or Wonderland Lake or wherever. And I'm probably doing some upper body dance moves because we get to keep it fun, we get to keep it light. And easy running you should be able to do something like that if you're running easy enough.
Yeah. Yeah. I really like to tap into my senses. I like to be able to take in the views of the run. It's really
Mm,
hard to do when you're pushing through a race or a hard workout. It's really hard to appreciate what's surrounding you. So I like to be able
yeah.
to tap into that for my easy runs. I also like to really try to find a level of thought and maybe even like gratitude, and just finding like, what are you grateful for today? Or maybe what are some issues that you want to work through in your mind today? Like these easy runs are the epitome of solitude, especially as you
Yeah.
become more experienced as a runner. So it's important to understand that like we can tap into our senses. We don't have to dig on these easy run days. We can really just find a great level of appreciation for what we're doing, and we can maximize our love of this act that hopefully we get to do for many, many years.
Oh yeah, I love that. And it is something that the sports psychologist who came to the running retreat mentioned a few weeks ago, like taking that surrounding, that's what is going on around you as like a wide focus view, and focus in on the birds chirping if you're not listening to music, or the wind, or the beautiful scenery, or the bike path, or maybe it's like rocks on the ground, like don't fall, all these different things. And it gives us the ability to kind of appreciate where we are, what we're doing, find that solitude, like you mentioned, or that gratitude, or maybe it is working through something that's on your mind that might be stressful, or maybe it's something else I love to do is like think about business ideas or creative ideas or things that will move the needle with the coaching business. And a lot of times running will give me that creative outlet and provide that creative outlet. And I have heard a lot of other people share that, where movement, we've talked about, or maybe we haven't talked about this, like movement can provide creativity outlets. How many people use a treadmill and walk very slowly when they're working, or go on walks for business calls or for calls or for meetings or different things, whatever that is. So that's kind of a fun piece to it too. And you might get more benefit out of an easy run than just building your aerobic capacity and that foundation and that Ferrari Porsche engine in your body. You might also get a cool idea or two out of it as well.
Yeah, and I believe there's studies done that says that you actually have increased like memory and retention of ideas when you're moving. So that's certainly really cool. And we joked about at the beginning of this episode how like this is everyone's favorite topic, but truly it is an extremely important topic to discuss.
It is.
Easy running and this aerobic training that we do, because as endurance athletes, like that's what's going to move the needle. We have to build that foundation. And earlier in the episode, I said I was going to provide you with two metaphors. I forgot to give you the second one, so I'm going to give it to you now as we close out this episode. And it is that running is a turkey baking sport. So when we bake our turkey on Thanksgiving, we don't put it in the oven at 500 degrees and try to cook it as fast as possible. We put it in there at a low temperature and we let it cook for an extended period of time. And that's really what we're doing with our training. We're cooking our fitness gains low and slow, and we're using time to our advantage. So we can kind of close out on that idea. But I love that we had questions coming in from our listeners here today. It was a great way to engage with everyone who listens to the podcast, and also to get great ideas that we can discuss. So we'll definitely be doing that in the future. So make sure that you connect with us on social media. You can find me on Instagram at Austin Myers Fitness. And Sarah, where can they connect with you and Elevate Your Running?
At Sayra, SAYRAH Runs Happy, and at Elevate Your Running, Instagram and Twitter. Thanks everyone for listening today, and know that everyone goes through this. I got to see Emma Coburn running a double yesterday afternoon. She looked like she was running a very easy pace, and it was probably faster than like my half marathon pace, and that's fine. But know that everyone does it, and even the fastest people in the world embrace the easy running, and that's where and how they get to be as fast and as strong as they are. So thank you all for listening today. We'd love your feedback on this episode. And thank you for everyone who sent in a question, and have a great week.